Black Panther Wakanda Forever introduced us to Namor, who will protect his underwater kingdom at all costs, even if that means going up against the Avengers. Let's take a dive into Namor's history with the Avengers and other factions he has been associated with. There are certain aspects of Namor's comic book history that align with Wakanda Forever, and there are others that were changed for the screen adaptation of one of Marvel's oldest characters. Seriously, Namor was created before Marvel was even officially calling themselves Marvel. Comparing the two could lead to movie spoilers, so proceed ahead with caution. Namor was the first mutant that was written. Even though it did not start that way, it had to be retconned during the 1960s. The origin story in the comics differs from the one we were given for the MCU variation. In the comic books, Namor is born half human and half Atlantean, where his father was a human sea captain named Leonard Mackenzie, and his mother was the Atlantean. His mother, named Fen, was actually an escaped Atlantean princess, and Atlantean soldiers thought that Fen was taken from Atlantis and attacked Leonard Mackenzie's crew. Fen returned to Atlantis, pregnant, since she believed Mackenzie to be dead, and named her child Namor, which means avenging son. His heritage is why he isn't blue like the other Atlanteans, and why he is stronger than his kinfolk. This fact also leads to a rough upbringing that puts a chip on his shoulder, and probably has a lot to do with why he is always changing sides with a slight blow of the wind. The main feature to Torment, though, was definitely the ankle wings, right? There is no convincing me that the ankle wings are or ever were a cool idea. Who greenlit that? It's just not practical in these stories that are obviously based in reality. I'm sorry, I'll move on from the ankle wing hatred. A commonality between the comics and the MCU is that Namor is dependent on water. In Wakanda Forever, it is the source of his power, and in the comics, it is linked to his memory. In Fantastic Four #1, the Human Torch found a very scruffy homeless man that he somehow recognized as Namor. Namor was also suffering from amnesia at the time that was caused by the Serpent Crown. After giving him a fire shave, literally burning his facial hair off, which probably smelled absolutely terrible, he tossed him back into the water and his memories were restored. Returning to the water broke the curse or spell that was causing Namor to suffer from the memory loss. Namor returns to Atlantis to find it had been destroyed by nukes while he was suffering from his amnesia. This ultimately leads him on a path for vengeance against the surface world. Maybe the same would have happened if he was kept out of water in Wakanda Forever, but as of right now we don't know if he'd lose his memory. What we do know is that he becomes weaker the drier he gets. They should just lock him in a college dorm room, since there's nowhere drier than that on the planet. Namor rules over Atlantis in the comics, and not Talokan, which is probably one of the biggest deviations from the comics to the screen. Personally, I'm okay with that change, since talking about Atlantis feels kind of played out, and almost exactly like some other popular underwater superhero. No one comes to mind, but I swear there is someone. One aspect that does match between the comics and the MCU are that both cities were created because of a vibranium meteor. However, Namor's main motivator to dislike the surface world is slightly different than in the comics. In the comics, he is rightfully upset to learn about the destruction of his home like we previously discussed. In the MCU, he has disdain for the humans, and he is upset at the sight of a vibranium locator that he found in the ocean. Namor knows the importance of vibranium, and, like Wakanda, does not want anyone coming into his territory to try and take his resources. Overall, the Namor we have in the MCU isn't outrageously different from the comic book variation, but there are many, many paths that could be taken regarding Namor's alliances as the character progresses in future MCU installments. There are more characters set to be introduced to the MCU, and depending on how important they become, they could also provide more insight into how Namor will be utilized moving forward. Once he crosses paths with literally anyone outside of Wakanda, the theories will start flying. For now, all we can do is look at his comic history and connect thin lines to obscure dots, like we are trying to solve a crime in a storage unit. The Avengers, for those who have forgotten, are Earth's mightiest heroes, and Namor has a complicated history with them, which could lead to some very interesting storytelling within the MCU. The Human Torch, a character not even in the MCU as of yet, is a character that Namor has the strongest ties to. He also has a deep respect for Captain America, who he hasn't met yet in the MCU. There are also storylines that connect him to the Hulk, who obviously also exists in the MCU, but that Namor also has not personally met. So, my best guess for when we might see the Submariner again would be in Captain America's next movie titled Captain America: New World Order. That would potentially be the earliest return to the screen, but it could also be in the planned Fantastic Four film. The biggest question will be whether or not we find him forming alliances with his comic book friends, or if he will continue to play a more antagonistic role in the MCU. He could easily do both and fly along the line of ambiguous morality on winged ankles, bobbing and weaving to his heart's content. Let's begin with the times he went against the Avengers. One of the more interesting storylines is when Namor stood alongside the X-Men against the Avengers. They were literally battling on the moon over Hope Summers, who both the X-Men and the Avengers were searching for, when Thor came out of nowhere, followed shortly by the Phoenix. Namor always saw himself as more of a mutant, he even calls himself one in Wakanda Forever, due to the fact that he has special abilities and stood out from his own people, something he was often teased for. Growing up feeling like an outcast among the people he should feel safe with makes him more empathetic to the struggle of mutants, which is why we see him teaming up with the X-Men a few times throughout his history. At the end of the day, Namor is going to align with whomever he believes is going to help him accomplish his goal of protecting his home, which is why there are so many instances in which we find him on the quote-unquote good side and the quote-unquote bad side of conflicts. Did I forget to mention that during the fight on the moon, the Phoenix was destroyed into 5 parts and Namor became part of the Phoenix 5, granting him amplified powers and he attempted to completely submerge Wakanda? Silly me. Trying to drown an entire kingdom and killing innocents isn't something that the Avengers can ignore. They eventually beat the Phoenix Force out of him and ended his time as an ultra-powerful mutant. Namor is constantly trying to remind everyone that Atlantis, the place he reigns over in the comics, remember, is not to be messed with by anyone. Every time Namor makes the Avengers mad, which is often thanks to his goal of punishing the surface world for one misdeed or another, he also likes to make up for it by doing something incredible for them, like finding Jean Grey in an underwater cocoon. Some members of the Avengers hold a stronger grudge than others, like Black Panther for obvious aforementioned reasons, and protest when Namor teams up with them, but most of them can put their personal beliefs aside for the greater good. One of the earliest times Namor butted heads with the Avengers, he actually had the Hulk on his side. The Hulk felt persecuted by the Avengers, so he left them and was found by Namor, who convinced him to join forces. However, they had a toxic relationship that consisted of always trying to outdo the other, which caused them to lose the fight. Namor was so mad about his loss that he threw a large block of ice into the Atlantic, which just so happened to have Captain America frozen within it. Look at that, another lost superhero. They should really keep better track of these things. Namor has been discovering and/or locating important characters for as long as he has been around. He also put together an underwater team called the Defenders of the Deep that the Avengers had to fight against. The Defenders of the Deep were founded to enforce the new policies that Namor had put in place regarding the surface world and their relationship with the ocean. Essentially, Namor was trying to monopolize the ocean and wanted to make it off-limits to everyone except for its natural inhabitants. This belief led to the Defenders of the Deep being unnecessary aggravators multiple times and eventually caught the attention of the Avengers. After attacking one too many ships and research stations, the Avengers tried to negotiate with Namor. However, some giant piranhas went rogue and ate some people, which caused an all-out battle to try and subdue Namor. Eventually, Namor made things right by executing the piranhas that wouldn't listen to his commands and retreated from the fighting. The Submariner can be described as an extremist when it comes to his disdain for the surface world, and when you're straight up attacking anything in the water that doesn't call the ocean home, it is hard to argue in favor of his character. In the comics, there is a place called Avengers Mountain, and it is often attacked and targeted by the ultra baddies of the MCU. An MCU version of the Avengers Mountain might not be that far away thanks to the Eternals, but I digress. Namor was present at the mountain when it was attacked by the Masters of Evil, which was organized by Dr. Doom, and he went up against a young version of Thanos. Once everyone present was able to ward off the Masters of Evil, Namor joined forces with the Avengers to stop them, and also the Council of Red. The Masters of Evil go up against the Avengers multiple times throughout history, and even go against some future teams that are going to appear in the MCU, like the Thunderbolts. So, we may be in the works for some Masters of Evil screen time, and their roster changes often in the comics. So, if they appear, their lineup could surprise the fans. The Submariner teams up with all sorts of different heroes left and right. Sometimes it is with established teams like the Avengers or the Defenders, and sometimes it is with a solo hero, like the Human Torch. Whatever he decides to do, he always seems to team up when it best suits him, in his driving force of protecting his people and the ocean. Namor is a major conservationist and would burn the surface world to protect his homeland. Captain America is Namor's biggest advocate and oftentimes convinces him to help the Avengers, even if someone he already has a beef with is present, like Hercules. Namor and Hercules have a complicated, yardstick measuring relationship that we might get to see in the MCU, thanks to Thor: Love and Thunder's credit scene. But even that grudge can't stop Namor if he puts his mind to a task. Now, Namor, along with other Avengers, sometimes join other forces to protect the Earth and their own interests. Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Namor make up a few of the members of the Illuminati, with Iron Man and Doctor Strange being the obvious Avengers on this team. The team was formed to try and prevent world-ending events from occurring, which is similar to the Illuminati we see in the Multiverse of Madness. Essentially, a team that discusses what to do with active and potential large-scale threats to humanity. No big deal or anything, really low-stakes work. Namor has his own code that he follows without hindrance, and when something doesn't sit right with him, he isn't afraid to let it be known. Like when the Illuminati decided to launch the Hulk into outer space to prevent him from doing any major damage, which ultimately led to some pretty awesome Hulk storylines. The Submariner had an issue with this and left the group. It is possible we could see a more fleshed out and comic book accurate Illuminati within the MCU, now that Namor has joined the universe. But we will have to patiently wait and see. Namor also joined forces with the Fantastic Four in the comic Fantastic Four number 104. During this story, Namor finds Magneto injured next to a volcano. Seeing as Namor identifies with the mutants, he brings Magneto to Atlantis so he can recover and heal. While that is happening, he helps the Fantastic Four on several missions around the world, only to return to Atlantis to discover that Magneto has taken his throne. If we have learned anything thus far, it is that Namor does not take kindly to anyone toying with Atlantis. The Fantastic Four help him regain his throne, which is a task he might have struggled to accomplish alone. It seems like every time Namor leaves Atlantis unattended to do some overall good for the entire world, and not just the ocean, someone undermines him and takes his throne. It's no wonder why he is reluctant to help anyone other than his people when his kingdom and throne are in constant threat of being taken from him. Namor was part of a team that was filled with all bad guys called the Cabal. It included Dr. Doom, Loki, the Hood, Green Goblin, and Emma Frost. This came to be when Namor's son, Kamar, aspired to rule Atlantis and thought the best way to accomplish that goal would be to start a war with the United States. Since Atlantis and Namor are synonymous with one another to the surface world, all the blame was being placed on Namor, and no one would come to his aid except for one person, Dr. Doom. The Green Goblin gave everyone in the Cabal a separate mission and promised them different rewards depending on their wants if they succeeded. You see, Norman Osborn wanted to show that he was finally able to get all of these bad guys in check so that he could call on them for favors that would benefit both parties. Dr. Doom and Namor followed his orders as a ruse, with plans to let Osborn implode under the pressure, and then Doom was going to take over to rule the surface world, with Namor ruling the ocean. None of this works out as planned, and the group eventually disbanded after the attack on Avenger Mountain. Namor is an excellent morally gray character that can turn on the person or persons he is working with at the drop of a hat if it means protecting his people. The potential of this character is sky high. How do you think the MCU will handle Namor? Will he end up flipping to the good side, or stay the antagonist that he was in Wakanda Forever? Let us know in the comments, and thank you for watching.